I have a confession to make. I've never used Windows 8, or 8.1 for that matter. I've never even seen these operating systems in real life, or in person depending on your ontological perspective. I remember reviews at the time saying these versions of Windows were more difficult to use with a keyboard and a mouse. Microsoft at the time were trying to pivot towards touchscreens. Windows 8 is also famous for not even having a start button. Like what? I can't even imagine this, so I have to try this out for myself. I've been searching for a while to try this version of Windows out on, and I think I found the perfect candidate. This is the Viliv S5 Ultra PC PMP portable media player. It has no built-in keyboard and it has no mouse controller. It's just got a touchscreen and it comes with Windows XP installed. There's also a few buttons on the front, including a 4-way direction controller, which acts like the cursor keys on a standard keyboard. The only way to control the mouse pointer is with the touchscreen. The Viliv S5 is an odd device. It's made by a South Korean company that were known for making ARM-based portable media players running Windows Mobile. And they made a couple of full Windows-based tablets as well. The S5 was released in 2009, and they decided at the time not to go with Windows Vista, which had come out 3 years earlier in 2006. This is probably a good decision, since Vista was so heavy that it could hardly run well, even on modest spec laptops at the time. Many people were just staying with Windows XP, even up until the 2010s. The S5 comes with a really nice hand strap, which includes this guitar pick style stylus at the end. As far as the overall design goes, it's one of my favourite form factors for an ultra micro PC. The only other micro PC that I've seen that doesn't have an inbuilt keyboard is Sony's 2004 Vve U. As a fan of ultra micro PCs, I was surprised to only recently find out about the Viliv S5. And when I did, I immediately went online and I just happened to find one. I was lucky though, because these don't seem to appear very often. The S5 I received comes with some default Viliv software, including this alternate user interface for launching different programs and adjusting settings. Viliv also includes its own media software, and there's even a web browser. It looks like all of Viliv's software has larger user interface buttons to make it easier to use with its small screen and touch interface. One of the physical buttons on the side brings up the soft keyboard, and for what it is, it's not too bad. This is also not a fresh factory install. There is some interesting third-party software that came with my second-hand unit. This was most likely added by the previous owner, and it includes CPU-Z and what looks like some different CPU overclocking softwares. This seems like the sort of thing I would have done if I'd owned this back in the day. The LCD is 1024 by 600 pixels, and if I switch it to this portrait mode, it makes it look like if Windows XP was running on a phone. Though the Viliv software was not designed to run like this. There was, though, a version of the S5 that could take a SIM card and use 3G networks, but this was only for data, and it was never intended to be phone capable. Now that I'm familiar with this device, I'm now ready to try installing Windows 8. I think I managed to find all the drivers online and the original installers for the Viliv software, but I'd still like to first back up this entire system before installing anything else, just in case. To do this, I'm going to take this apart and get the hard drive out and back it up directly. This will also let me see the hardware inside, which I'm very keen to see. Taking off the removable battery, and we can see quite a number of stickers on the back here. It looks like the stickers that cover 2 of the screws have already been breached, so it's most likely someone's been inside this before me. The battery looks like it's a fairly decent capacity, which, according to the specifications, this has up to 6 hours of battery life when playing media. The battery I have here is unfortunately quite worn out, but it still seems to last about half an hour. I should be able to just remove the screws, but this is where things get a bit strange. as I unscrew them, they start lifting the back casing upwards. This is not normal for anything I've taken apart before. There also seem to be some clips still holding the back casing on around the side. Eventually the back does come off, and the insides look kind of weird. First I have to unplug what looks like a vibration motor. My first impression is that the whole thing feels kind of cheap. This is not the same quality as I'm used to seeing inside, say, Toshiba or Sony. Lifting the hard drive out, and we can see it's an Mtron 32GB SSD. This is likely an aftermarket upgrade, because the S5 originally came with either a 30GB or a 60GB mechanical hard drive. I'm also noticing some unpopulated chip spaces. I'm so tempted to take this apart further. Okay, I'll keep taking the screws out and remove the main board. I just hope I don't break anything. It looks like there's a passive heatsink covering the CPU. Carefully removing that, and there's the Intel Atom CPU. And it has some onboard RAM around it. And there's more unpopulated chip spaces in here. It looks like some of these would have been used for the 3G model. Looking at all this, especially the solder on some of these pads, I really get the impression this is a budget quality build. And it's in everything, from the casing to the look of the main board. This is not something you would get from a major manufacturer. But I don't want to denigrate the build quality too much, because for a small company, they actually did amazingly well building this. And despite now knowing what it's like inside, I still think this thing is awesome and I love it. I'm now going to back up this Mtron drive. This brand were often sold in the late 2000s as replacement SSDs for 1.8-inch mechanical hard drives. And I know this because I already have one with the exact same brand and capacity. And this is exactly how I would have upgraded this machine if I'd had one back in the day. It's all a bit odd finding this machine in a state that I probably would have had it, but I swear I got this recently, and this is not my work. To back up this drive, I'm going to use this tiny hard drive caddy for 1.8-inch ZIF hard drives. I can then plug this into the USB port on another computer for backing up, such as my GPD Win 1 running boring old Windows 10. To do the backup, I'm running Win32 Disk Imager to make a complete image of the entire hard drive. This shouldn't take too long, maybe about half an hour, so I'll just let it run. And with that, success! I can now start putting this back together, and I can start playing around with my Viliv S5. Knowing that I've got a full backup just in case. Okay, I've reassembled this, and I hope this dodgy thing still works. Which it doesn't, but it seems I haven't reseated the power switch properly. So I just need to carefully unscrew and lift the rear case up again. And with that, it's done. Okay, here goes. And it's still working. Now it's time to install Windows 8. The first thing I'm going to do is check the BIOS. I want to make sure it's set up for USB booting, and I'm curious to see what other options it's got. To get in the BIOS, the user manual says hold the menu button during the Viliv boot logo. Once in, I find the 4-way direction button is barely able to navigate the BIOS. A single direction click does nothing, while holding down the direction button moves everything too fast to be usable. The BIOS doesn't seem to be intended to be controlled in this way at all. There's some very odd and strange things about this computer. Like, it wasn't quite polished for a final release. I found it much easier to control the BIOS by plugging in a USB keyboard. And with that, I think it's time to install Windows 8. I've prepared the Windows 8 installer on this USB memory stick, but starting up the installer and there's no touchscreen driver. So it looks like I'm also going to have to add a USB mouse as well. I've now got a USB mouse and keyboard and memory stick all plugged into a hub because this machine only has a single USB port. But everything seems to be working, and it's time to enter a product key. When entering a Windows 8 product key, make sure the date in the BIOS is set to at least 2012, because when I first tried this, the date was 2009. And I learned the hard way, this Windows installer won't accept a product key with that date. So far, this Windows 8 installer looks a lot like Windows 7. But I can see it's not Windows 7 because we've got that flat-looking Windows logo. Windows 8 is from 2012, when most operating systems were switching from having colourful icons with 3D effects to everything having boring and flat logos and icons. Check out the new way to use Windows. And there we go. There's the start page. But unfortunately, I still have no response from the touchscreen. It looks like I'm going to have to start installing all the drivers and apps. The first thing I'm noticing is the desktop is now a tile on the start page. Clicking on it brings up a desktop. And sure enough, there's no start button. This is madness. A desktop that feels deprioritized and hidden away with a new interface. One of the most iconic aspects of Windows is gone. Okay, I really want to get the touchscreen working. There are a few complications with the drivers though, since they were designed for Windows XP, and some are tricky to install. Though I was also able to find some drivers for Windows 7 that were released by Viliv for the S5, even though these don't always work well with Windows 8. Though there are some old forum posts from people upgrading their Viliv devices back in the day. This really helped me get most things working. The Intel graphics driver, for example, can only be installed by switching the installer to Windows XP compatibility mode. And after a lot of effort, I was also able to get the touchscreen working. This required installing the touchscreen driver over the top of the Microsoft mouse driver. While the touchscreen works, Windows 8 seems to be detecting it only as a mouse, which means it's not using the Windows 8 touchscreen mode. I can't do things like clicking and dragging the menu. I have to use the scroll bar down the bottom like a plebeian. The graphics driver also seems to be only partially compatible. There's also now a lot of tearing and flickering as I move about on the Metro user interface. There's also another big problem. It seems the Windows 8 built-in apps won't run on a screen with a resolution below 1024 by 768. With this LCD only having 600 vertical pixels, the inbuilt apps are not starting. While there is a workaround, by switching the resolution of the desktop to 1024 by 768, this downscales the screen to fit on the LCD and looks quite fuzzy. I'm not impressed at all. So maybe all these problems means this is not the perfect Windows 8 machine I was looking for. I'm here now, so I'm going to try installing some games. And the first game I tried is Banished. This is an awesome mouse-controlled game, which should work really well with this touchscreen. But the speed of this Atom CPU is just not up to the task. This game is from 2007, so I'll try running some older games instead. Next I thought I'd try Civilization 4 from 2005. But straight away with the intro sequence, we're still getting some serious speed problems. Intel Atom CPUs are just not that fast, especially with Windows 8 installed. It's just not powerful enough to run these sorts of games, so I tried dropping back all the way to Civilization 3, released in 2001, and this seems to be running okay. Left-clicking the mouse is a little bit tricky, but it does seem to work. Though I have to admit, I'm not very familiar with this game. But this gives us an idea of the compatibility of these early Intel Atom CPUs. They seem to be equivalent in power to desktop CPUs from up to 10 years earlier. Think Windows 98 era gaming when using these early Atom CPUs. For example, I tried Warcraft 2. This is so old that it runs using DOSBox. It seems to run okay, but I found a weird problem with the mouse controls. A USB mouse works fine, but the touchscreen mouse goes haywire. One thing I really enjoy when trying out games like this is finding new games that I didn't even know existed. For example, I found this game DEFCON. While it's certainly too slow to be playable on here, this game looks amazing. I've been looking for a game like this ever since the first time I watched War Games. I'm going to have to try playing this game on a more powerful computer. But back to the Viliv S5. I'm not exactly sure what it would be useful for, beyond being a media player and a weird micro PC. But there's just something about it that I really like. I haven't tried Linux yet, but I'm curious if there are any distros that could handle the quirks of this unusual system. The Intel GMA 500 graphics are a big problem though. While looking around, I did find a port of Android x86, a very early port. I didn't go too far into this though. If you have any suggestions for this machine, then let me know in the comments. There are some interesting possibilities here, and I hope I can do something with this in the future. But that's it for the moment, and I'll see you next time.